They thought she was just another defendant they could intimidate. They believed the badge was a shield that made them untouchable. They were wrong. Inside the quiet halls of the 4th District Courthouse, Officer Grant Maddox made the greatest mistake of his life. He raised his hand against Member of Parliament Talia Prescott. Grant expected her to cower. Instead, he woke up on the courtroom floor with his career and his life in ruins. This was not merely a story about a fight. It was a story about the brutal and unstoppable force of consequences. This was what happened when the system tried to break the wrong woman. Rain poured over the outskirts of Oak Creek, a town caught uneasily between old wealth and deteriorating industrial neighborhoods. The gray sky seemed to drain the color from everything beneath it. Talia Prescott tightened her hands around the steering wheel of her modest Ford sedan. She did not look like the political force she had become. Talia wore a plain beige raincoat over a business suit, and her hair was pulled into a severe, practical bun. To a casual observer, she might have appeared to be a school principal or a mid-level executive. Anyone who looked more closely, especially into her eyes, would have seen the steel. Talia was the newly elected member of parliament representing the district. She had fought her way out of the East Oak Creek housing projects, attended law school on a scholarship, and eventually entered the halls of legislative power. She was not part of the establishment. She was the disruption. Officer Grant Maddox hated disruptions. Grant sat inside his patrol vehicle, partially concealed behind a billboard advertising a personal injury attorney. Everything about him seemed thick, his neck, his arms, and his skull. He had served long enough to understand exactly how far he could bend the rules before anyone objected. Inside the precinct, officers called him the Bulldog. He was not intelligent, but he was loud. In Oak Creek, loudness often passed for authority. Grant watched Talia's Ford move along the road. She was technically exceeding the speed limit, but only by an insignificant amount. Then Grant saw the driver. He noticed a confident black woman behind the wheel of a respectable car. Something about it irritated him. The shift had been quiet, and he felt the need to demonstrate his dominance. Blue and red lights flashed behind her, cutting through the rainy gloom. Talia looked into the rear-view mirror and sighed. "You have got to be joking," she muttered. She pulled safely onto the shoulder, turned off the engine, and placed both hands where they would remain clearly visible upon the steering wheel. She understood the procedure. She had taught seminars about it. Grant approached slowly. He adjusted his belt, pulled up his trousers, and struck the window with his flashlight even though daylight still filled the road. Talia lowered the glass. "Good afternoon, officer. Was I speeding?" Grant did not answer immediately. He leaned toward the open window, allowing rainwater to drip from the brim of his hat into the vehicle. He chewed gum with a wet, irritating sound. "License and registration," he said flatly. Talia moved carefully. "I am reaching into the glove compartment." She narrated every motion, a habit left over from her years as a defense attorney representing young people who had not survived police encounters as safely as she had. She handed him the documents. Grant glanced at the identification. Talia Prescott. The name meant nothing to him. He did not follow politics. He followed sports and precinct gossip. He noticed the letters MP on the special registration designation. "What does this mean?" he scoffed. "Military police? You do not look military." "Member of Parliament," Talia corrected him in a cool, steady voice. "I represent this district." Grant released a harsh, barking laugh. "Is that right? Well, Member of Parliament, you were speeding. My speedometer indicated otherwise." "Are you calling me a liar?" Grant's tone changed instantly. The bully had arrived. "I am stating what I observed." "If you issue a citation, I will challenge it in court. That is my legal right." Grant's face reddened. He was not accustomed to being questioned. He especially disliked receiving resistance from a woman. He leaned farther into the vehicle until his face was only inches from hers. "You think some impressive title makes you special? Out here, I am the law. You are another driver who was speeding." He snatched the license from her hand. "You are ordering me out of my vehicle over a speeding citation?" Talia asked, lifting her eyebrows. "That is not standard procedure, officer." She looked at his badge. "Maddox." "I smell alcohol," Grant lied. The accusation came easily. He had used it many times before whenever he wanted to escalate a stop. Talia did not drink and had not consumed alcohol in years. She immediately understood what he was doing. She removed her seatbelt and stepped into the rain. Talia stood 5 feet 9 inches tall and held herself perfectly straight. She did not shiver despite the cold water soaking through her coat. "Turn around, put your hands on the hood," Grant ordered. He searched her far more roughly than necessary. His hand lingered around her waist, a calculated gesture intended to humiliate her. Talia did not react. She was recording every detail inside her memory. The smell of stale tobacco on his breath, the unauthorized patch on his vest bearing the word predator, the absence of an operating body camera, or, more accurately, the fact that he had deliberately switched it off. "You are resisting," Grant whispered near her ear. I am standing completely still, Talia replied, lowering her voice. Officer Maddox, I strongly advise you to issue the citation and allow me to leave. You are making a mistake. Is that a threat? Grant spun her around and slammed her back against the rain-covered metal of the car. It is legal advice, Talia answered. Grant placed her in handcuffs. He tightened them until the steel cut painfully into her wrists. Disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and I think I will add assaulting an officer because of your attitude. He pushed her into the rear of the cruiser. When the door closed between her and the rainy road, Talia did not cry. She did not panic. She stared through the mesh divider, her eyes narrowing. Grant entered the front seat and laughed quietly to himself. He picked up his radio. Dispatch, I am bringing in an unruly and agitated female. Grant believed he had captured a trophy. He did not realize he was transporting a live grenade. The holding cell inside the 4th precinct smelled of bleach and hopelessness. Talia had been fingerprinted, photographed, and deprived of her blazer. She sat on a cold bench wearing a white blouse stained with rainwater and dirt. She used her telephone call to contact Adrian Calloway. Adrian was not a politician. He was a shark wearing a 3-piece suit. He had been Talia's mentor during law school and had become one of the most feared civil rights attorneys in the state. The atmosphere inside the station changed when Adrian arrived. Sergeant Russell Dean, who was usually half asleep behind the desk, immediately sat upright. Adrian did not shout. He whispered. When Adrian Calloway whispered, government employees lost their pensions. Talia was eventually released on bail. She walked from the station with dark bruises surrounding both wrists. Adrian waited beside his vehicle while lighting a cigarette. They charged you with assault? He asked. He claims I lunged at him, Talia said, rubbing her wrists. There is no patrol camera footage? He says the equipment malfunctioned. Of course it did. Adrian released smoke into the night. Judge Everett Halstead is handling the hearing. You know him? Talia gave a bitter laugh. Everett Halstead, the man who believes society should still operate according to another era. Yes, I know him. This is a setup, Talia. Maddox and Halstead play poker together. The police union is already shaping the story. They released your booking photograph. He held up his phone. Drunken member of parliament attacks heroic police officer. It is already on the news. Talia looked at her own phone. Her notifications were filled with abuse, demands that she resign, and racist hatred. Beneath the hostility were messages of support from constituents who genuinely knew her. Let them create their narrative, Talia said as she entered the vehicle. I want my hearing. They are accelerating the process. I want Maddox on the witness stand. You are playing with fire, Adrian warned. Halstead will allow him to do almost anything inside that courtroom. Good. Talia watched the streetlights pass outside the window. I want him comfortable. I want him arrogant. The courtroom was packed. Reporters had descended like vultures. The story offered them an irresistible narrative. A rising black female politician destroyed by her supposedly uncontrollable anger. Talia sat at the defense table wearing a fresh navy suit. She appeared flawless and calm. Beside her, Adrian arranged the legal documents with surgical precision. Officer Grant Maddox sat across the aisle in full dress uniform, presenting himself as the image of an American hero. He had placed a small bandage on his cheek to suggest an injury that did not exist. Grant smiled toward the jury and then toward the gallery. When he looked at Talia, the smile twisted into a sneer. Judge Everett Halstead entered the courtroom. His face resembled a crumpled paper bag, and his eyes contained no warmth. All rise, the bailiff announced. Sit down, Everett grunted. He looked over his glasses at Talia. Ms. Prescott, these are deeply disturbing charges for an elected official. They are fabricated charges, Your Honor, Adrian said as he stood. We will determine that. Everett dismissed him with a wave. Prosecution, call your witness. The prosecutor, Miles Garner, appeared exhausted and nervous. He called Officer Maddox. Grant entered the witness box, placed one hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Talia studied him. She noticed the way he leaned backward and smiled at his fellow officers in the gallery. He felt protected. Officer Maddox, Miles began, tell the court what happened. Grant launched into a performance. I stopped the defendant because she was driving erratically at a dangerous speed. When I approached, she became aggressive and started shouting. I attempted to calm her, but I smelled alcohol. When I asked her to exit the vehicle, she attacked me and scratched my face. I was forced to restrain her for her own safety. The gallery murmured. Reporters wrote rapidly. Liar, Talia whispered. Objection, Miles shouted. The defendant is attempting to intimidate the witness. Sustained. Everett struck the gavel. Ms. Prescott, another outburst, and I will hold you in contempt. Your Honor? Talia stood. She understood courtroom rules. She had practiced law, but the injustice was burning through her chest. He is lying under oath. I request permission to treat the witness as hostile. Denied, Everett snapped. Sit down, or you will return to a cell. Grant continued describing Talia as a monster. He called her hysterical and animalistic, using every coded word he could find. When cross-examination began, Talia rose instead of Adrian. Your Honor, I will conduct the cross-examination myself. Adrian hesitated. Then he nodded. He understood that she needed to do this. Talia walked into the center of the courtroom. She did not remain behind the podium. She approached the witness box until she stood close enough to smell Grant's inexpensive cologne. Officer Maddox, she began, her voice carrying clearly throughout the room. You testified that I scratched you. That is correct. Grant touched the false bandage. My fingernails are short and have remained that way for years. Talia raised her hands for the jury to see. How did I scratch your face? You used your keys, Grant answered, inventing another detail. My keys remained inside the ignition. You stated that in your own police report. Talia lifted the report from the evidence table. Page 2, keys remained inside vehicle. Are you lying now, or were you lying when you wrote the report? Grant's face turned red. I cannot remember every detail. It was a chaotic situation. It became chaotic because you created the chaos, Talia replied. Officer, is it true that your personnel file contains excessive force complaints? Objection, Miles called. Relevance. Sustained, Everett said sharply. Move on, Ms. Prescott. Talia refused to retreat. She moved closer, deliberately entering Grant's personal space. You enjoy hurting people, do you not, Grant? You enjoy making yourself feel powerful. I protect this city, he spat as his composure began to crack. You protect nothing. You are a bully wearing a badge, and you selected the wrong victim. Grant leaned over the witness box railing, rage twisting his face. The mask of the control professional was disappearing. You listen to me, you little officer, Judge Halstead warned. But he did not use the gavel. He appeared entertained. Say it, Talia challenged quietly. Say what you truly want to say. You should have remained in the gutter where you came from. Grant hissed loudly enough for the front row to hear. Is that your legal opinion? Talia asked mockingly. That was the breaking point. The bulldog snapped. Grant rose inside the witness box. Shut your mouth. He did not think. He did not notice the cameras or consider the judge. He reacted. Grant lunged over the low wooden railing. The courtroom gasped as one body, his large hand swung through the air. Crack. It was not a closed fist punch. It was an open-handed slap, dismissive, humiliating, and filled with contempt. His palm struck Talia across the face. The sound echoed through the mahogany courtroom like a gunshot. Her head snapped sideways. The room became completely silent. Even the ventilation system seemed to disappear. Everett froze with his gavel suspended above the bench. The prosecutor dropped his pen. Grant stood breathing heavily, his hand still raised while the reality of his actions reached him. He had physically assaulted a member of parliament inside a courtroom, in front of cameras, witnesses, and a judge. But the story was not truly about the slap. It was about what happened next. Talia slowly turned her face toward him. Blood appeared on her lip. One bright red drop moved down her chin. Her eyes had become absolute ice. She no longer looked like a politician. She looked like the soldier she had once been. Mistake, Talia whispered. The silence ended when Grant moved again. Unable to accept what he had done, he tried to regain control through greater violence. I told you to be quiet, he shouted. He raised his hand again, this time forming a fist. Grant stepped down from the witness box and towered over her. The bailiffs began moving, but they were older and too far away to intervene in time. Grant stood within striking distance. Talia did not wait to be rescued. She lowered her center of gravity, her heels pressing firmly against the parquet floor. She had served in the military police and had once instructed others in close quarters combat. She had not used those skills for many years. Muscle memory had not forgotten them. Grant threw a wild punch toward her jaw. Talia did not step backward. She moved forward. Her left forearm struck his arm with a sharp block, forcing the punch away from his target. Grant stumbled, betrayed by his own momentum. Talia pivoted. Her hips generated the force. This was not a slap. It was not a scratch. Her right fist traveled directly into the nerve cluster beneath his chin. The cross was delivered with the precision of a piston. Thud. The sound was heavy and sickening. Grant's eyes rolled backward. His knees collapsed. He did not fall gracefully. He crumpled face first like a tree cut from its base. His body struck the floor hard enough to shake the tables. He did not move. Talia stood over him. She adjusted her blazer and wiped the blood from her lip with the back of her hand. She looked down at the unconscious officer who had terrorized people in her district. Then she looked toward Judge Halstead. Everett's mouth hung open. His face was pale. "Your Honor," Talia said steadily, although her breathing had become heavier, "I am placing this officer under citizen's arrest for assault and battery. I acted in self-defense under the laws of this state." Chaos erupted. "Turn off the cameras," someone shouted. "Call a medic," another voice yelled. Two bailiffs finally reached Talia. They looked frightened of her. Their hands hovered near their tasers. "Do not," Talia warned, lifting one finger. "I am the victim. He attacked me. Every person here witnessed it." Adrian was already beside her, placing himself between Talia and the approaching deputies. "If any of you touch her, I will sue this county into the Stone Age," he roared. "He assaulted an elected official, and the entire event is on video." A young reporter named Marissa Vale was live streaming from the gallery. Her phone had captured everything: the slap, the knockout, and the aftermath. "Are you seeing this?" Marissa whispered into the device, her hands trembling. "Member of Parliament Prescott just knocked out Officer Maddox. He is unconscious on the courtroom floor." The number of viewers was already climbing. Grant groaned and attempted to lift himself. He collapsed again, saliva gathering on the expensive courtroom rug. His predator image had disappeared. He looked like what he truly was: a bully who had finally been struck back. Everett repeatedly hit the gavel, desperately attempting to reclaim control. "Clear the courtroom. Everyone leave. Bailiffs, take Ms. Prescott into custody." "Custody?" Talia shouted above the noise. "For defending myself?" "Contempt and assault," Everett replied, panicking. He knew Grant had been responsible, but the system protected its own. "Remove her from my sight." The bailiffs approached. Talia voluntarily placed her hands behind her back. She did not resist. She wanted the image captured. She wanted the public to see her being handcuffed while paramedics cared for the man who had assaulted her. As officers led her through a side door, Talia looked back toward Marissa's phone. She did not smile. She simply nodded. The war had begun. Talia returned to the same holding cell she had occupied before. This time, the atmosphere was entirely different. The officers did not sneer or make jokes. They looked at her with equal parts fear and admiration. News moved quickly through a police station. She had knocked out Grant Maddox, the bulldog, the officer known for lifting enormous weights. One strike had dropped him. Talia sat on the cot. Pain pulsed through her hand. She suspected one of her knuckles might contain a small fracture. It had been worth it. Beyond the precinct walls, the world was catching fire. Marissa's video spread across social media and television. The headline appeared everywhere: "Courtroom knockout, MP Prescott drops corrupt officer." The police union immediately attempted to build a defensive narrative. Union President Curtis Sloan held a press conference on the courthouse steps. "This was a vicious and completely unprovoked attack against a decorated officer," Curtis lied while sweating beneath the television lights. "Officer Maddox was attempting to maintain courtroom order. Ms. Prescott used potentially lethal military techniques. We demand her removal from office and felony prosecution." Curtis had a problem. Online investigators enhanced the courtroom audio. They isolated Grant's statement. "You should have remained in the gutter where you came from." They clearly heard the slap. The union's story was collapsing. Inside the hospital, Grant woke with his jaw wired shut. He was placed in a private room guarded by two sympathetic officers. His head felt as though it had been split open. When he checked his phone, he found no flood of support. He saw hatred, criticism, and panic. A message from Everett read, "You idiot, you destroyed everything. Keep your mouth shut." Grant threw the phone against the wall. He believed he was the victim. He could not understand why the world refused to see it. Adrian arrived at the jail carrying a writ of habeas corpus. He looked energized, like a man preparing to enjoy an expensive meal. "You are trending across several countries," he told Talia through the bars. "Is that helpful?" she asked while pressing a cold bottle against her injured hand. A sympathetic rookie officer had given it to her. "It gives us leverage," Adrian replied, "but they will fight dirty. They will investigate every part of your life, your former husband, your brother's drug charge, everything. My brother has been sober for a long time. My former husband is irrelevant. Let them investigate." "What about Maddox?" "He has a concussion, a fractured jaw, and an ego that may never recover." Adrian smiled. "But here's what truly matters. Since the recording spread, my telephone has not stopped ringing. Reporters? Victims." Talia sat straighter. Victims of Maddox, dozens of people who were too frightened to speak before, a shop owner he extorted, a teenager he beat inside an alley, a woman whose sexual assault complaint he buried because the accused man was his cousin. Talia's eyes hardened. "Collect every statement." "I already have people doing that, but there is more." Adrian looked around to ensure no officer was close enough to hear him. "One caller works as a clerk for Judge Halstead. She says she possesses evidence that Halstead and Maddox were operating a criminal scheme involving traffic penalties, bail bonds, and kickbacks." Talia rose, forgetting the pain in her hand. That is the evidence that destroys them. We still need to obtain it, Adrian warned. Halstead knows we are investigating him. He has authorized a search of your house. They are looking for drugs, weapons, or anything capable of damaging your reputation. Let them search. My home is clean. They could place something there. I have a private investigator watching your property, Adrian assured her. If they place so much as a toothpick inside, we will document it. The cell block door opened. Police Chief Warren Ellis entered. He looked exhausted. Warren had spent his career attempting to walk a narrow line between political interests and police loyalty. That line had disappeared. Ms. Prescott, you are being released on your own recognizance. No bail? Talia asked. The district attorney decided that requiring it would be unwise given the public response. Warren personally opened the cell. Chief, Talia said as she stepped out, I want Grant Maddox's badge. I also want Everett Halstead's gavel. Warren looked at her without arguing. If even half of what I am hearing is true, you may receive both. Talia exited the precinct into a storm of camera flashes. A massive crowd had gathered chanting her name. She did not wave or smile. Talia walked directly toward the microphones. A man believed he could put me in my place, she told the crowd. He thought his badge gave him permission to assault a citizen. He discovered that he was wrong. But this is not only about me. It is about every person in Oak Creek who has been slapped, beaten, or silenced by men like Grant Maddox. I will not simply defend myself against these charges. I will expose their corruption and tear it out by the roots. When you have a story, bring it to me. Do not be afraid anymore. The bully is down. The crowd roared. Across town, inside a dark office, Judge Everett Halstead poured himself a drink. He had not surrendered. He picked up an unregistered phone and called a number. We have a problem, he said. The Prescott woman needs to disappear. Not physically. That would attract too much attention, create a scandal, destroy her credibility immediately. The voice on the other end was rough. It will be expensive. Do it. Everett ended the call. Talia had won the physical confrontation. The war for her life had entered its most dangerous stage. The assault against her reputation began quietly. It arrived through digital whispers and carefully manufactured lies. Talia was awake inside her modest two-story home in a quiet section of the district. The adrenaline that had carried her through the arrest and the viral attention had faded, leaving behind a cold anxiety. An unmarked sedan waited several houses away. Inside sat Conrad Wells, the private investigator Adrian had hired. Conrad was a former Drug Enforcement Administration agent whose eyes missed almost nothing. His presence was the only reason Talia could attempt to rest. Her laptop chimed. Then it chimed again. A flood of notifications followed. Talia opened it, the pale screen illuminating her exhausted face. Her inbox was filling with bank alerts, attempted social media logins, and news notifications. A tabloid website funded by secret money connected to the police union had published an explosive story. Exclusive: The Secret Life of MP Talia Prescott. Embezzlement, drug money, corruption. The article was built entirely from lies. It claimed Talia had not paid for law school through scholarships, but through illegal money connected to a local gang leader. The article displayed altered bank records showing transfers into offshore accounts. The forgeries were poorly made. To an uninformed reader, however, they appeared convincing. Talia called Adrian. He answered immediately. I have seen it, he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. Do not panic. This is Preston Gage's work. Gage, the fixer? Halstead's cleanup specialist. He hacks systems and manufactures scandals for money. This is the attack they promised. They want to poison public opinion before your trial. Everything is false. My education was funded through grants, scholarships, and 3 jobs. Truth is not their priority. Confusion is, but they made an error. What error? One of the forged bank records contains the signature of a branch manager named Raymond Denton. Denton was already dead when the document was supposedly signed. Talia exhaled. It is careless. It is desperate. But the article is only a distraction. While we defend you against it, they will attack the person who holds the real evidence. The clerk? Yes, her name is Elena Moreau. She is hiding inside a motel near the edge of town. She called me. She is terrified. A patrol vehicle has passed her room repeatedly. They are searching for her. Talia rose immediately. I am going to retrieve her. No, Adrian said sharply. You are under intense scrutiny. When you are seen near a witness, they will claim witness tampering and revoke your release. If they reach her first, the evidence disappears, and she may die. I understand how these men operate, what Talia said. Maddox was the muscle, but Halstead directs the operation. He will not hesitate to silence her. She picked up her keys. Tell Conrad to follow me. I will not go alone. The Starlight Motel appeared to have survived unchanged from another era. Paint peeled from the walls, and a neon sign flickered above the parking lot. Rain had begun falling again, washing the city's dirt into the gutters. Talia parked her Ford around the corner. Conrad stopped behind her and stepped from his sedan wearing a raincoat. This is a dangerous idea, MP Prescott, he said. Politics is a dangerous idea, Conrad. This is a rescue. They moved through the shadows toward room 114. The curtains were tightly closed. Talia knocked using the pattern Adrian had arranged. Knock. Pause. Knock, knock. The door opened slightly. A chain rattled, and one terrified eye appeared through the gap. Elena, Talia whispered. The door opened. Elena Moreau was a small woman trembling while clutching a thick leather-bound ledger against her chest. She looked like an animal caught inside a trap. They know I am here, Elena sobbed as she pulled Talia inside. I saw Maddox's partner, Officer Tate Mercer, near the motel. We are taking you somewhere safe, Talia said with calm authority. Conrad, inspect the area. Wait, Elena said, holding out the book with shaking hands. You need to see what this contains. You must understand what you are fighting. Talia opened the ledger. It did not document only traffic citations. It contained a detailed record of corruption extending throughout the city government. Judge Halstead kickbacks, Officer Maddox collections, council members, payments. The ledger was a map of Oak Creek's decay. Prominent business owners, politicians, and senior police officials were listed throughout it. Millions of dollars had been laundered through bail bond companies and confiscated property. This could destroy half the city's leadership, Talia whispered. That is why they want me dead, Elena cried. The window exploded inward. A metal canister rolled across the carpet while releasing gas. Tear gas, Conrad shouted as he rushed back inside. Get down. Two men kicked open the door. They wore tactical clothing, ski masks, and carried suppressed weapons. Talia reacted without hesitation. She grabbed the heavy lamp from the bedside table and threw it at the first attacker. It struck his shoulder and disrupted his aim. The bullet missed and entered the wall. Conrad moved with sudden speed. He tackled the second gunman and drove him against the dresser. Run, he shouted while struggling with the attacker. Get her out. Talia grabbed Elena's arm. Move. They climbed through the rear window into the alley. Gas filled the motel room, burning their eyes and lungs. They ran through the rain, struggling for balance on the wet pavement. My vehicle, Talia shouted, pointing toward the end of the alley. They reached the Ford. Talia pushed Elena into the passenger seat and jumped behind the wheel. The engine started as the first attacker emerged from the alley and raised his weapon. Talia shifted into reverse and accelerated toward him. She did not intend to kill. She drove close enough to force him to dive away. Then she spun the car around and raced onto the main road. Call Adrian, Talia shouted, her heart hammering against her ribs. Tell him we have the ledger. Tell him to contact federal authorities immediately. Oak Creek awoke to another storm. Talia did not return home. She drove directly to the FBI field office in the state capitol. She entered the federal building covered in smoke and residue, holding the ledger while Elena remained beside her. Adrian met them at the entrance. The political landscape changed rapidly. Inside his hospital room, Grant lay with his jaw wired shut and drank a protein shake through a straw. The physical pain was severe. The silence from his former allies hurt more. Everett had not visited him. The union representative no longer responded to messages. The hospital room door opened. Grant expected a nurse. Two men entered wearing jackets marked with bold yellow letters. FBI. Grant's eyes widened. He tried to speak, but only an unintelligible sound emerged. Grant Maddox asked the lead agent, Victor Hale. You are under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, and attempted murder. Grant shook his head violently. Attempted murder? Victor said. The men from the motel identified you. They claim you hired them while lying in this hospital bed. Telephone records support the allegation. It was a lie. Everett had hired them. The federal agents understood how frightened defendants behaved. They wanted Grant to turn against the judge. Judge Halstead claims you acted independently, Victor continued, leaning over the bed. He is negotiating an agreement. He says you created the operation and that he was afraid of you. The betrayal struck Grant harder than Talia's punch. Everett was blaming everything on him after years of loyalty and criminal service. Grant's face became purple with rage. He motioned for something to write with. Victor handed him a pen and notepad. Grant wrote furiously, tearing the paper beneath the pen. He did not write a confession. He wrote names, locations, financial records, and places where cash had been hidden. At the bottom, he wrote one sentence: "I will bury Everett Halstead." At that same moment, Everett sat inside his chambers preparing for court. He believed himself untouchable. He assumed the motel attack had succeeded. He believed Talia was either dead or running for her life. A disturbance erupted inside the outer office. "You cannot enter," his secretary shouted. The heavy doors opened violently. FBI agents, state troopers, and internal affairs investigators flooded the chambers. Everett Halstead, one agent ordered, "Step away from the desk." Everett stood, his expression filled with indignation. "Do you know who I am? I am the presiding judge of the 4th District. Leave my chambers." "You are a suspect in the racketeering investigation." The agent walked behind the desk and picked up the gavel Everett had used to silence countless victims. He placed it inside an evidence bag. "This is absurd. I will have your badge." "You will have plenty of time to write the complaint from federal prison," the agent replied. "Handcuff him." Investigators marched Everett from the courthouse. The lobby was filled with people. This time, they were not only journalists. Hundreds of community members had gathered. The shopkeeper Grant extorted. The families of young defendants Everett sentenced severely for minor offenses. Talia stood at the front with one arm supported by a sling after the violence at the motel. She looked exhausted but unbreakable. Everett saw her and stopped. He stared at the woman he had tried to destroy. Talia did not shout or celebrate. She raised her phone. The live news feed displayed a headline: "Operation Clean Sweep, Judge and Officer Indicted." Everett's shoulders collapsed. His arrogance disappeared. He suddenly looked weak, old, and pathetic. The process of justice moved quickly afterward. Grant's cooperation in Elena's ledger caused the remaining pieces to fall. The police chief resigned in disgrace. The union president was indicted for misusing funds. Several officers were suspended while investigators reviewed their conduct. The most meaningful victory was not the arrests. It was Talia's exoneration. Every charge against her was dismissed with prejudice. The district attorney, attempting to protect his own position, held a press conference and personally apologized. "Ms. Prescott acted in self-defense during an unlawful assault," he said. "She is a hero." Talia watched from her living room. Adrian sat beside her and poured 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "You did it," he said. You confronted the entire machine and won." "We won," Talia corrected him. "But the work is not finished. Maddox and Halstead must still face a jury." "They will," Adrian replied. "You will be the central witness." Public outrage remained intense when the federal trial began. The courthouse in the Capitol was a fortress of granite and glass, surrounded by news vehicles. This was more than a criminal trial. It was a reckoning. Inside Courtroom 4B, recycled air carried the weight of expectation. Every seat in the gallery was occupied. Activists wore Justice for Prescott shirts. Law students filled notebooks with observations. Ordinary citizens traveled from distant communities to witness the conclusion. Talia sat at the prosecution table with her back as straight as a steel beam. She wore white deliberately. It was not the color of surrender. It represented truth. Beside her, lead federal prosecutor Renee Cross organized the case files with the calm confidence of a predator standing beside a closed trap. Across the aisle, the defense table resembled a funeral. Grant was almost unrecognizable. His police uniform, the armor that once protected his identity, had been replaced by an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit from the federal detention center. Extended isolation for his own safety had hollowed him out. He had lost considerable weight. His skin looked unhealthy, and his eyes moved nervously around the courtroom without resting anywhere. The bulldog had vanished. Only a frightened man remained. Everett sat nearby, separated from his former enforcer by an expensive defense attorney who appeared eager to be somewhere else. Everett attempted to preserve the image of a distinguished judge. He wore a sharp suit, his hands shook uncontrollably beneath the table, and he tried to hide the tremor by clasping them tightly together. "All rise," the bailiff called. Federal Judge Celeste Rowan entered. She was known for refusing to tolerate courtroom theatrics. After taking her seat, she examined the defendants. "Be seated. We are here for closing arguments and the verdict in the United States versus Everett Halstead and Grant Maddox." The trial had produced a relentless collection of evidence. The jury examined the ledger Elena saved from the motel, banking records, and testimony from shopkeepers Grant extorted. The central image, the moment burned permanently into public memory, was the recording of the slap. Talia returned to the witness stand, not as a defendant, as the voice of the victims. "The government calls Talia Prescott," Renee announced. Talia walked forward. The courtroom became completely silent. She swore to tell the truth, her voice reaching the rear of the room without assistance. "Ms. Prescott," Renee began gently, "the defense argues that Officer Maddox was experiencing extreme stress. They also claim Judge Halstead did not understand what his subordinate was doing. After everything you witnessed and survived, what is your response?" Talia looked toward the 12 jurors holding the city's future in their hands. Then she turned toward Grant. For the first time since the incident, he raised his eyes and met hers. He flinched. "I have spent my life believing in the law," Talia began, her voice low but powerful. "I climbed from the poor section of Oak Creek into Parliament because I believed the system could function when people were willing to fight for it. When Officer Maddox raised his hand inside that courtroom and struck me, he did not simply hit a woman. He did not simply hit a member of Parliament." She allowed the silence to hold the words. "He struck every person in this city who had ever been too frightened to speak. He depended upon my fear. He believed his badge gave him ownership over my dignity. He believed that because Judge Halstead occupied the bench, truth no longer mattered." Talia leaned forward, holding the railing of the witness stand. "I did not strike him because I was angry. I did not knock him unconscious because I wanted to cause pain. I did it because, during that moment, I had to prove that we are not property. We are citizens. When the law is transformed into a weapon by criminals wearing uniforms, righteous people have a duty to break that weapon." A juror wiped tears from her cheek. Even Judge Rowan appeared to hold her breath. "They are not victims of stress," Talia concluded, her voice hardening. "They are the architects of their own destruction." The jury withdrew to consider the evidence. When the signal announced that they had reached a verdict, tension inside the room became electricity. The defendants were ordered to stand. Grant required assistance. His legs appeared unable to support him. Everett stood rigidly and stared toward the wall, still refusing to accept reality. The foreperson, a mechanic from a nearby county, held the verdict form with shaking hands. "In the matter of the United States versus Grant Maddox, conspiracy to violate civil rights, guilty. Wire fraud, guilty. Assault against a federal witness, guilty." Each verdict struck Grant like a hammer. He released a low cry and collapsed forward, his forehead hitting the table. The man who had terrorized Oak Creek dissolved into sobs. "In the matter of Everett Halstead, racketeering, guilty. Money laundering, guilty. Solicitation of murder, guilty." Everett's face became gray. The final remains of his public image disappeared. He suddenly looked ancient, a man watching his legacy become ash. He faced the rest of his life inside a concrete cell. Judge Rowan struck the gavel. The sound carried finality through the courtroom. "The defendants will remain in federal custody pending sentencing. Court is adjourned." The gallery erupted, not in celebration but in a collective release of breath. It was the sound of a community releasing years of buried trauma. Federal marshals approached the defendants. During the chaos, a quiet moment unfolded. As Grant was led past the prosecution table, he stopped and resisted the marshals for a moment. He looked at Talia. His eyes were red and filled with painful clarity. "I am sorry," he whispered in a broken voice. "I did not know." Talia rose. She towered over him, not physically but morally. She looked at the man who had attempted to destroy her life. She did not offer forgiveness. Forgiveness was too inexpensive for something that had cost so much. "You knew, Grant," she said coldly. "You simply believed there would be no consequences. Serve your sentence and learn how to become a man." The marshals pulled him away. The heavy doors closed behind the defendants. Talia's departure from the courthouse resembled a scene from a film, but the emotion surrounding it was real. When she opened the double doors and stepped into the afternoon sunlight, the noise became overwhelming. Camera flashes filled the air. Reporters pushed microphones toward her. Talia did not look at them. She looked at the people. Hundreds stood outside. The shopkeeper, the teenager assaulted in the alley, Elena Moreau now protected by federal authorities and watching from a secure location. Adrian stood beside Talia like a proud father, lighting a victory cigar despite signs forbidding smoking. Talia raised one hand. The crowd became quiet. "They want a statement," she said into the microphones. "They want to know how it feels to win." She slowly shook her head. "This is not winning. Winning would mean none of this ever happened. Winning would mean we did not need a secret ledger to prove that justice should be blind. This victory does not belong to me. It belongs to Elena Moreau, who risked her life for the truth. It belongs to everyone who was ordered to sit down and remain silent but stood anyway." Talia looked directly into the news cameras, her eyes burning with conviction. "We cleaned the house. Now we must rebuild the foundation. The bully is down. Let us ensure he never rises again." The seasons changed. The 4th District scandal slowly disappeared from the headlines and was replaced by the quiet, difficult work of reform. Talia sat on the porch of her home during a crisp autumn evening. Gold and crimson leaves drifted onto the lawn. Conrad Wells, now her permanent chief of staff and head of security, carefully gathered them into piles. Talia held a tablet on her lap. The screen displayed the final legislative vote. The Prescott Act had passed. It was a landmark law requiring operating body cameras. imposing severe penalties for tampering, ending qualified immunity for violent offenses, and establishing independent oversight committees for every police precinct in the state. A vehicle stopped outside. Adrian stepped out. He moved more slowly than before, but the sharpness remained in his eyes. He climbed the porch steps and sat in the rocking chair beside her. "You saw the vote?" he asked. "I saw it." Talia placed the tablet aside. "The newspapers are calling you the Iron MP," Adrian said with a quiet laugh. "Party leadership contacted me again. They are no longer discussing only the Senate. They believe you could become governor." Talia looked toward the peaceful street. A patrol vehicle moved slowly past the house. The officer saw Talia on the porch. He did not sneer or attempt to intimidate her. He slowed, gave her a respectful nod, and continued his patrol. Talia smiled. It was not the practiced smile of a politician. It belonged to a soldier who had survived a war. "Governor," she said, laughing freely. "One fight at a time, Adrian. One fight at a time." Talia looked down at her right hand. The knuckles had healed completely. The skin was smooth, but beneath it, the bone had grown denser and stronger than before. The system had attempted to break her. It had tried to slap her back into the gutter. Instead, it forged her into something unbreakable. That is the story of how Talia Prescott took one slap across the face and transformed it into a revolution. Grant Maddox and Everett Halstead believed they were untouchable. They learned the truth through consequences. When you strike a woman made of steel, you are the one who breaks. This was not merely a confrontation inside a courtroom. It was a battle for the soul of a city. Talia proved that justice does not arrive through luck. It arrives when good people decide they have endured enough. When this story inspires you, when you believe justice must reach everyone regardless of power, press the like button. It helps more stories like this reach the public. Subscribe and activate notifications. What would you have done in Talia's position? Would you have defended yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. Stay strong. Stay safe. Never allow them to break you.